Just last night, he was seen at an exclusive London club, smiling, drink in hand, every inch the aristocrat. By morning, Viscount Halberton had vanished into thin air, leaving behind no trace but a cufflink and a whisper. When Scotland Yard was left baffled, they turned to the one man who could unlock any mystery, Hercule Poirot. It began, as so many of our adventures did, a newspaper article, an envelope marked private, a raised eyebrow from Poirot, and the faint glint in his eye that told me my quiet plans for the week were quite finished. Within 24 hours, we were on a train to Hampshire, bound for Tichborne Hall, embroiled in one of the strangest cases we ever encountered. Stranger still, it began with a resurrection. It was a damp, gray April morning, and I had just settled into breakfast, kippers, and a pot of strong tea, when Poirot, hidden behind his copy of the Times, gave a soft exclamation. "Tiens, Hastings, look at this. A mystery most unusual." He turned the paper toward me, one elegant finger tapping a headline halfway down the page. "Missing heir returns to Tichborne Hall. Man claiming to be baronet lost at sea 30 years ago alarms family and local officials." Below the headline was a photograph of a square-faced man in a poorly tailored suit, standing before a large, ivy-strangled manor house. He had the broad-shouldered build of a laborer, and a defiant tilt to his chin. I read aloud, "Sir Roger Tichborne, presumed drowned in the wreck of the Alberta in 1892, has returned alive and unannounced. Now going by the name James Tarrant. The man claims to have suffered memory loss following the disaster, living for decades in the Australian outback, until a chance discovery restored his identity. The Tichborne estate, long passed to his younger brother, now faces a potential legal challenge." "Well," I said, folding the paper, "that's a new one." "No, not new," murmured Poirot, eyes alight, "but most elegant. You see the possibilities, Hastings? A man returns after 30 years. He claims to be who he once was. Some believe him, others do not. It is a question of identity and truth. But how can anyone prove it after so long?" Poirot tapped his temple. "There are always details, a scar remembered, a phrase spoken in childhood, the exact way a man ties his cravat. Less details, Hastings. They do not lie." Just then, there came a knock at the door. Miss Lemon entered with her usual efficient air and placed a single envelope on the breakfast table. "Special messenger," she said. "From Hampshire." Poirot raised an eyebrow, opened the envelope, and read the letter within. His expression grew thoughtful. "It is from Lady Frances Tichborne herself," he said. "The mother? She wrote to you." "Mais oui. She has read of me. She says there are things this man remembers that no impostor could know, and yet other things he forgets that her son never would. She begs me to come to Tichborne Hall and tell her if her son is truly returned, or if she is being cruelly deceived." I gave a low whistle. "That's rather more serious than I thought." Poirot folded the letter with care. "Hastings, we go to Hampshire. There's a ghost walking at Tichborne Hall, and I intend to discover whether he is made of flesh and blood, or smoke and lies." I felt a mixture of curiosity and unease. "I suppose I shouldn't be surprised you're taking the case, but still, it sounds quite out of the ordinary, even for you." Poirot gave a faint smile. "Hastings, the ordinary holds no interest for my intellect. But a mystery such as this, the question of identity, the shadows of the past, the hopes and fears of a family torn by doubt, that is exactly the kind of puzzle I live for." "And you think this man might actually be who he says he is?" I asked. Poirot paused, looking at me with those sharp, intelligent eyes. "I think that only by seeing with my own eyes, and questioning with my own voice, can I hope to know, Hastings. Until then, all is uncertainty." I could not help but feel that this was to be a case unlike any other, a case that would test Poirot's legendary powers to their very limits. The morning light was pale and hesitant as we boarded the early train to Hampshire. The city's fog still clung stubbornly to the edges of the station, but as the carriage rolled away from London, the mist thinned, revealing the patchwork of fields and hedgerows that lay beneath the clearing sky. Poirot sat opposite me, his gaze fixed on the window, but his thoughts clearly elsewhere. For once, he was silent for a while, which I took as an invitation to break the quiet. This Tichborne family, I ventured. What do we really know of them, beyond the articles and Lady Frances's letter? Poirot folded his hands thoughtfully. A family proud of its lineage and titles, Hastings. The Tichbornes have long been rooted in Hampshire soil, their name entwined with the history of the county. Yet pride can be a double-edged sword. It sharpens loyalty, but also suspicion. I nodded. Lady Frances strikes me as a woman clinging fiercely to hope. To believe, after 30 years, that her son has returned, it must be a relief, but also a torment. Indeed, the heart's desires are often at odds with reason. Lady Frances's conviction carries weight, but it is not proof. I studied Poirot's thoughtful face. And Sir George, the younger brother, he has everything to lose. Ah yes, the man who holds the estate now. Such a position breeds motive, but also anxiety. Is his opposition to the claimant born of conviction, fear, or something darker? Nous verrons. We shall see. The carriage rocked gently as the train wound through the countryside. And the man himself, James Tarrant, or whoever he truly is? Poirot's eyes narrowed slightly. A man adrift between worlds. His claim is bold, but even boldness can be the mask of desperation. The truth lies hidden somewhere in the tangle of memory and time. I found myself gazing out at the fields, green and glistening with spring's renewal, and wondered what shadows lurked beneath the surface of that ancient family home. Poirot's voice broke my reverie. We shall enter the world of the Tichbornes, where ghosts walk unseen, and truths wait to be uncovered. I raised my cup in silent salute. To the little gray cells. He smiled. To the little gray cells, and to justice. The train sped on, carrying us ever closer, to the mystery that awaited beyond the rolling hills. The journey from London to Hampshire had been long, but uneventful. Yet, as the train drew near the small country station, the atmosphere thickened with anticipation. I had watched the fields turn from the neat geometries of suburban gardens to the sprawling pastures dotted with sheep, their fleeces mottled gray and white beneath a sky that threatened rain. The station was little more than a halt, its platform nearly deserted, save for a solitary footman standing beside a black motor car. As we disembarked, the chill of the early April morning bit into our faces, and I tugged my coat tighter about me. Poirot's sharp eyes took in every detail, the station's worn wooden sign, the gleam of damp cobblestones, the neat hedge beyond. The quiet heart of England, he murmured, but in the quietest places, secrets often lie deepest. We rumbled slowly along a narrow lane lined with gnarled oaks, whose twisted branches seemed to reach out like ancient fingers. The air smelled faintly of damp earth and budding leaves, the first breath of spring struggling through the lingering cold. Ahead, through a shifting mist, Tichborne Hall appeared, a grand, but faded manor that seemed more the remnant of a bygone age than a lively family home. Its gray stone walls were swathed in ivy, and the tall chimneys stood like silent sentinels against the clouded sky. Magnificent, I said, though a note of melancholy tinged my voice. Yes, but one senses the weight of years, Hastings. The household's memory is as much in its stone as its people. The carriage stopped before the great oak doors, ornately carved with the family crest, a shield bearing 3 lions passant beneath the motto, Fortitudine et Prudentia. Before we could summon assistance, the heavy door swung open to reveal a small woman standing in the dim hall, framed by shadows, but undeniably commanding. Mr. Poirot, Mr. Hastings. She greeted us, her voice soft, yet resolute. Welcome to Tichborne Hall. Lady Frances Tichborne was slight and bent with age, her pale hands folded tightly in front of her. Her gray hair was pulled back in a severe bun, and her eyes held the same sharp intelligence I had seen in her letters, mingled now with exhaustion and something like hope. Madam, Poirot said, bowing with his usual elegance, it is an honor. Your letter conveyed a situation most troubling. I assure you, we shall do everything to uncover the truth. She smiled faintly, but the tension in her shoulders betrayed her. Thank you, Monsieur Poirot. I must confess, it is a relief to see a familiar face, even one so foreign as yours. I noted the slight quaver in her voice, and the way she glanced toward the shadows of the hall. From that darkness emerged a tall man with a rugged frame. His clothes were plainly cut and somewhat worn, as though he had lived a life far removed from the luxuries of a country manor. His face was square-jawed, with eyes dark and searching. He held himself with a quiet dignity that belied his rough appearance. "This is the man," Lady Frances said softly. "James Tarrant, or, as he insists, Sir Roger Tichborne, returned from the sea and the wilderness." I watched him carefully. There was something compelling in the way he looked, not just a man in the photograph, but a living presence charged with a strange mixture of defiance and vulnerability. "Sir," Poirot said, inclining his head, "I am Monsieur Hercule Poirot. We come at Lady Frances's request to learn the truth of your claim." He nodded, eyes steady. "I know who I am. I've carried the memory for years, fragments at first, but enough to convince me. Enough, I hope, to convince you." Before I could reply, a new voice cut sharply through the stillness. From the far end of the hall strode a man, tall and severe, his features hard and set with grim authority. "The younger son, Sir George Tichborne. You brought strangers into my home without my consent." His voice was icy, eyes flashing with anger. "And you expect me to accept this impostor as my brother?" Lady Frances's hands trembled. "George, please." Poirot held up a hand, his voice calm, but firm. "Mr. Tichborne, I understand your distress, but this is a matter that requires patience and reason, not rash judgment." Sir George's gaze flickered to the man at the center of the storm. "Reason? What reason can there be, when this man threatens to take what is rightfully mine? The estate, the title, everything my birth has earned." "Your birthright," Poirot replied quietly, "does not guarantee truth. We must seek the facts, no matter how inconvenient." The air grew taut with tension, as the three men stood like opposing forces, drawn into an inescapable orbit. Lady Frances stepped between them. "Enough. Let us sit and discuss this calmly. Monsieur Poirot, you will need to hear everything, both from my son and from those who doubt him." The house itself seemed to exhale with a shudder. The creak of ancient timbers and the distant ticking of a grandfather clock marking the passage of a family's long-held secrets. As we followed Lady Frances into the drawing-room, I glanced back once more at James Tarrant. There was pain etched into his expression, a yearning to be believed, to reclaim a life lost to time. The drawing-room was a spacious chamber, lined with bookshelves, their spines faded from decades of sunlight and dust. Heavy curtains remained drawn against the chill outside, muffling the pale morning light into a subdued glow. The furnishing spoke of former grandeur: carved oak chairs with worn upholstery, a grand piano veiled beneath a dust cloth, and a faded Persian rug that stretched across the creaking floorboards. Lady Frances motioned toward a cluster of chairs arranged near the hearth. "Please sit," she urged, settling herself with an air of weary dignity. Sir George remained standing by the window, his gaze fixed on the gardens beyond, as though searching for forgotten truth. James Tarrant sat apart, his posture stiff but defiant, eyes flickering between us all. Poirot cleared his throat and began with gentle formality. "Madam Messrs, I ask that you each share your perspective. Tell me, in your own words, the story of this man's return." Lady Frances spoke first, her voice a mixture of hope and sorrow. "When he arrived, it was as though a ghost had walked through the door. He remembered fragments, small, intimate details no outsider could know. The nursery rhymes my son loved, the very way he folded his letters. Yet other things escaped him, events and names that should have been as familiar as breath." Sir George's expression darkened. "Intimate details can be learned, madam. But why? If this man is truly my brother, does he fail the simplest tests? He cannot name the tenets of our estate, nor recall the traditions we have upheld for generations." James's voice was low, but unwavering. "The sea took more than my memory. Time and the outback blurred the rest. But the heart remembers." Poirot's fingers steepled beneath his chin. "Memory, Madame E.T. Messrs, is a delicate tapestry, sometimes torn, sometimes frayed, but never wholly lost. Trauma can scatter its threads." Sir George's lip curled. "And yet this tapestry is incomplete and inconsistent. How can we place our trust in a patchwork?" Lady Frances's voice broke with quiet passion. "Because it is all we have. Hope and the faintest whisper of a son returned." The room grew heavier with conflicting emotions, grief clashing with suspicion, hope battling despair. The tension was tangible, like a taut wire stretched to breaking. I leaned toward Poirot, whispering, "There's more beneath this than mere lost memory, isn't there?" He nodded, eyes narrowing. "Oui, Hastings. Secrets lie buried here, secrets waiting to see the light." As the afternoon sun dipped lower, the household gathered closer, drawn into the unfolding drama of identity, loss, and the fragile threads of a family's claim to truth. After the tense gathering in the drawing room, Poirot suggested we begin with a private conversation with James Tarrant himself. We were shown to the old library after luncheon. A fire had been lit, but the air still clung to a damp chill. The faint scent of aged leather and pipe smoke lingered in the tall-ceilinged room. The shelves stretched to the molded corners, filled with generations of serious bindings, law, natural history, family records. Poirot, settling into an armchair by the hearth, surveyed the scene as though it might offer him clues, even before the man himself appeared. James Tarrant entered without hesitation, his manner quiet but deliberate. He wore the same well-worn suit I had seen him in the day before, plain wool, slightly loose at the shoulders, as if once tailored for a broader frame. He had shaved, but his skin bore the sun-worn roughness of a man accustomed to harsher climes. Poirot gestured to the chair opposite. "Please, Monsieur, sit. I would like to begin by hearing your story, from your own lips, in your own time." The man, Roger, if he was who he claimed, nodded, folded his large hands, and fixed his gaze not on us, but on a point just above the mantel. "I suppose it began in the summer of '92, he said. "I was 19, the heir to a name I didn't fully appreciate, and reckless enough to prove it." He gave a faint, bitter smile. "There was a girl, Mary Dennison, a tenant's daughter, though she worked in the kitchens by then. We were young, stupid. It got out letters, whispers, promises, the sort of scandal that wouldn't even merit a line in the Times if I'd been a younger son. But I wasn't." Poirot said nothing, but nodded slowly. "My father was furious, and my mother, hurt, I think. They arranged for me to be sent abroad, officially to help oversee a cattle concern in Victoria, unofficially to be forgotten until the air cleared. I was to sail on the Alberta, bound for Cape Town, and then Fremantle. And the ship?" I asked, keeping my tone as neutral as I could manage. He turned his eyes to me. "Caught fire in the Indian Ocean. I remember waking to shouts. Flames on the water. I made it to a lifeboat. Or maybe I was pulled into one. I don't remember. I woke on a beach in Queensland. A pearling crew had found me, drifting in and out of consciousness." "You had lost your memory?" Poirot asked. "Everything." "Yes," he replied. "For months, I couldn't recall a single thing. Not a name, not a home. Not even that I came from England. They called me Jim. It stuck." "And you stayed in Australia?" He nodded. "I worked where I could, cattle, shearing, a bit of gold work in Kalgoorlie. I was good with numbers. Eventually, I started calling myself James Tarrant, half-remembered, perhaps, or entirely invented. I even thought of myself as Australian after a while. It was easier than asking questions." "When did the memories return?" Poirot leaned forward slightly. "Fragments," James said. "At first, just images. A staircase with a red runner. A lake with a small boathouse. The sound of someone calling Roger. I thought they were dreams. Then, one day, I saw a name in an old British paper, Tichborne. It hit me like lightning." He paused, frowning. "That was 10 years ago. It took me years to trace the estate, to be sure I wasn't going mad. When I arrived in England, I kept my distance. I walked past the gates of this house a dozen times before I dared write." Poirot steepled his fingers. "And Lady Frances? She accepted you?" "She did not know what to think at first," he said. "I told her things I remembered, childhood phrases, the name of the nurse who tended me when I had scarlet fever. I described the silver box Father kept his cigars in. Some details were right, others not." His shoulders lifted wearily. "But 30 years is a long time. I cannot pretend to remember all. Sometimes I think I only remember the memory of remembering." I caught Poirot's eye. His face gave nothing away, but I had seen that expression before, the look of a man turning over pieces of a jigsaw, knowing some do not yet fit. You do not resent the doubts? Poirot asked quietly. James looked away. How can I? I came back from the grave, Monsieur Poirot, and expected the world to welcome me. That was my mistake. But I know who I am. And what do you want? I asked. His answer came without hesitation. The truth, whatever it costs. If I am Roger Tichborne, I want my name back. If I am not, then I want to know who I am. Poirot gave a small, grave nod. Merci, monsieur. That will be all for now. James stood. As he turned to leave, he hesitated by the door. She believes me, you know, he said, referring to Lady Frances. Even when she pretends not to. A mother knows. And then he was gone. Lady Frances did not sit immediately when she entered the library. Instead, she went straight to the window and stood there a long moment, her back to us, gazing out across the garden terrace, where the first shoots of wisteria curled hopefully toward the light. I never thought I would live to see him again, she said at last, quietly. Not truly. Poirot rose as she turned and gestured gently to the seat James had vacated. Please, madam, it is better we speak in comfort. She nodded, crossing the room with slow steps, her movements precise despite the stiffness of age. Once seated, she clasped her gloved hands in her lap and looked down at them, as if weighing her next words against the full gravity of time. I do not know what I believe, she said, not looking at either of us. Or rather, I know too much to trust any truth entirely. You have seen the claimant closely, Poirot said, spoken with him, looked into his eyes. Do you feel he is your son? She closed her eyes. Some days, yes. I see in his eyes a flicker of Roger. His voice is rougher, slower, but now and then he says something, a turn of phrase, a rhythm of speech, and it is like a door opens in my memory. And yet, I asked gently. She looked up then, meeting my gaze with an expression that was part sorrow, part steel. And yet, there are absences, gaps. He remembers his governess, but forgets the name of our old retriever, Jupiter, who followed him everywhere. He recalls falling from an oak tree at 9 years old, but not the scar it left on his chin. She tapped her own in demonstration. Poirot tilted his head. Would you say the details he forgets are those a mother remembers best? A faint smile tugged at her lips, sad and knowing. Yes, exactly. You said in your letter that he knew things no outsider could have known. Poirot prompted. Will you tell me some of these? He recalled the way his father polished his spectacles before scolding the boys. He even described the design of a secret compartment in Roger's old writing desk. Details, intimate ones. And yet these memories could be acquired, Poirot said softly, if one had access to the household records or the confidences of someone close to the family. She nodded. It is not impossible. But who would go to such lengths for so long? I could see the weariness in her eyes, the conflict. Whatever else she was, Lady Frances was not a fool. Her mind remained sharp beneath the veil of mourning. Tell me, madam, Poirot said gently but firmly. What did you feel, truly feel, the first moment you saw him? She hesitated, and for a moment, her composure wavered. I felt my heart stop, she whispered. My Roger had a way of standing, just so, one foot turned slightly inward. And this man, he does the same without thinking. The gesture of a child carried unknowing into manhood. Can such a thing be faked? Poirot said nothing. I wanted it to be him. She continued, desperately. Perhaps I still do. But I have lived long enough to distrust both desire and memory. What if I am seeing what I wish to see? Is there anyone who might have aided his knowledge? Poirot asked. Letters, servants, friends? Her expression darkened. I fear so. Our former governess, Miss Pilling, has kept correspondence with several former staff. And there was the matter of my late husband's valet, Baxter. He left under difficult circumstances, a man embittered. It would not surprise me if he held resentments or secrets. And Sir George? Poirot asked carefully. Lady Frances gave a long sigh. George has never forgiven me for mourning Roger so deeply. He was always the colder of the two, But this business has hardened him further. I cannot tell whether he doubts the man out of logic, or out of fear that he may lose what he has come to see as rightfully his. Poirot rose, offering her a hand as she stood. "Merci, madame. You have helped more than you know." She nodded and turned once more to the window. "Monsieur Poirot, if he is not my son, you must tell me gently. And if he is, then God help this house." We left her there, half lost in the misted light, her silhouette framed by drapes and dust, the weight of memory pressing down like the stone lintel above the hearth. Sir George did not wait to be summoned. He arrived at the library precisely 10 minutes after his mother had departed, striding in with the confident, clipped step of a man used to command. His tall figure cut a severe silhouette against the rich wood paneling of the room, and he carried a riding crop under one arm, not for use, I think, but as a statement of control. He declined to sit. "If it's all the same to you, Monsieur Poirot, I'd prefer to keep this brief," he said. "I do not believe in wasting time, especially not on fantasy." Poirot inclined his head. "Of course, monsieur. We shall not keep you longer than necessary. But you understand, we must hear every side." George gave a short laugh, one without mirth. "Sides? There are only two: truth and deception." A pause, thick with the muffled ticking of the library clock. Poirot spoke gently. "Yet Lady Frances holds hope. She says this man recalls intimate details, things only a family member would know." George's jaw tightened. "Hope has blinded my mother before. She wants to believe, not for herself alone, but to banish the guilt she's carried all these years. But memory is too easily shaped. Monsieur, the man's knowledge is incomplete, or too convenient." I studied him as he moved to stand beside the hearth. His features, though more sharply drawn than James's, did bear a family resemblance, the same angular brow, the same deep-set green eyes. But where James had carried something of quiet desperation, George was all precision and force, as though emotion were a thing to be battled and conquered. "Tell me, monsieur," Pooh began, "what is it that convinces you this man is not your brother?" George's reply was immediate, almost rehearsed. "He knows the name of my father's nurse, and can describe the old billiard room, yes. But he could not recall father's pet name for him, nor the rhyme we invented as boys, the one only Roger and I shared. He does not remember the story behind George, the black sheep ram, after whom I was named out of a family jest. And he is left-handed, while Roger was not. My brother fenced with his left, but wrote with his right. This man signs with his left." Poirot nodded, taking mental notes. I, ever attentive, interjected. "But trauma, years abroad, memory can distort, can it not?" George's mouth curled faintly. "A life can be invented from scraps and hearsay. Is it so hard to imagine someone doing the same?" Poirot raised an eyebrow. "And the motive, the estate, the title, the weight of a name handed down over centuries. Do you think a man who has lived as a drifter would not be tempted by the thought of an English fortune?" The silence stretched. Poirot regarded him keenly. "And if you are wrong?" Poirot's voice was quiet, but deliberate. "If, against your conviction, this man is your brother, can you imagine it?" For the first time, a flicker of something, hesitation, perhaps even pain, crossed George's face. But it vanished as swiftly as it came. "I cannot afford to imagine it," he said quietly. "I have carried this family for decades, Monsieur Poirot. I do what must be done. That is all." Poirot bowed his head with respect. "Merci, Mr. Tichborne. Your candor will aid our investigation." Without another word, Sir George turned on his heel and strode from the library, footsteps sharp on the age-worn floor. I let out a breath as the door clicked shut. Not an ounce of doubt in him, Poirot. Poirot's gaze lingered on the closed door. "No, Hastings. Yet sometimes it is not doubt that leads us astray, but certainty." The library felt colder in George's absence, a room haunted by as many secrets as there were books upon its shelves. The following morning found us in the breakfast room, a less formal chamber overlooking a small walled garden, where dew clung to the rose bushes like a coat of silver. The tension of the previous day had not dissipated. It hung in the air, thick and cloying as the scent of old popery. "Well, Poirot," I said, spreading marmalade on my toast with more force than was strictly necessary. What a trio! A mother who wants to believe, a brother who refuses to, and a claimant who seems both genuine and a fraud all at once. My head is spinning. Poirot, who was meticulously arranging segments of peeled orange on his plate, did not look up. Because you are looking at the picture, Hastings, and not at the threads. The stories contradict, that is to be expected. But the lies, my friend, the lies must be consistent. It is there we will find the truth. He placed a final orange segment into a perfect star pattern and looked at me, his eyes bright with purpose. Today we shall tug on two threads. First, the past that is far away. Second, the past that is very near. I have already dispatched a telegram to our good friend at Scotland Yard. You've brought him into it, I exclaimed. His reach is long, Poirot said simply. I have asked him to make inquiries with the Australian authorities, the passenger list of the Alberta, any records of survivors found on the Queensland coast in 1892, and most importantly, any trace of a man named James Tarrant working in the gold fields of Kalgoorlie or on cattle stations. A man good with numbers, as he claims to be, may have left a trail. He brushed a crumb from the tablecloth, and while we wait for the long thread to be pulled from across the world, we shall examine the one right here. Lady Frances mentioned two former members of staff, a governess, Miss Pilling, and a valet, Baxter. The embittered valet, I recalled. She seemed to think he might hold a grudge. Precisely. A grudge is a powerful motivator. It can fuel revenge, certainly, but it can also fuel a desire for a very specific kind of justice. We shall begin with him. Summoning the butler, a stiff, elderly man named Jennings, who had served the family for 40 years, Poirot made his inquiries. Miss Pilling, sir, Jennings said, his voice a low monotone. Retired to Cheltenham some years ago. Lady Frances corresponds with her at Christmas. He provided the address without fuss. As for Mr. Baxter, he resides in the village. Number 3, Rose Cottage. He was my predecessor's under-valet before serving the old master. He left under difficult circumstances, we are told. Poirot asked gently. A flicker of emotion, disapproval, perhaps, crossed the butler's face. Sir George saw fit to dismiss him after his father's passing. Mr. Baxter had his own way of doing things, sir. A way that did not suit the new master. The implication was clear. Baxter's loyalty had been to the old regime, not the new. Rose Cottage was a small, stone-built dwelling with a thatched roof and a garden overrun with weeds. The man who answered the door was stooped and wheezing, his face a web of angry red veins. Yet his eyes, when they fixed on us, were sharp and suspicious. This was Alfred Baxter. We are here on behalf of Lady Frances, Poirot began, his tone disarmingly pleasant. We are looking into the matter of Sir Roger's return. Baxter gave a harsh, barking laugh. Sir Roger? You mean the Australian fellow? Come in. I have nothing better to do than talk of ghosts. He led us into a cluttered parlor that smelled of stale tobacco and damp wool. He did not offer us a seat, but sank into a large, battered armchair himself. You served the late Sir Reginald for many years, Poirot continued, undeterred. You must have known the young Master Roger very well. Knew them both, Baxter rasped. Roger was the spirited one, always getting into scrapes. George was the cold fish, always watching, calculating. Sir George believes this claimant is an impostor, I interjected. He mentioned that his brother was right-handed, whereas this man is not. Baxter snorted. Roger wrote with his right, yes, but the boy was clever. Tried to teach himself to use his left for everything else. Said it would make his mind sharper. Fencing, sketching, even tried batting a cricket ball left-handed. Drove his father mad. Poirot's eyes gleamed. Interesting. A detail Sir George failed to mention. George only mentions what suits him, Baxter muttered. He couldn't wait to be master of this house. Sacked me within a month of the old man's funeral. Said I was too set in my ways. The truth is, I knew too much about his little economies. The way he'd sell off a piece of timber from the estate without a record. You hold no love for Sir George. That is clear, Poirot observed. Would you be pleased to see him lose the estate to a returned brother? Baxter's gaze was cunning. I'd be pleased to see justice done. If the man is Sir Roger, he deserves what's his. And have you spoken to this man? Poirot's voice was like silk. Perhaps offered him assistance? A few memories to jog his own. The old valet's eyes narrowed. I've spoken to no one. I keep myself to myself. But a man with a grievance hears things. The staff at the hall still talk. They say the Australian knows things only family would know. Such as the real reason he was sent away. Poirot asked softly. The name of the girl in the kitchen's Mary Dennison. Baxter froze for a fraction of a second, his grip tightening on the arm of his chair. I wouldn't know about that, he said a little too quickly. Wouldn't you? Poirot pressed. It was the great scandal of that summer. The reason Sir Reginald sent his heir to the other side of the world. A valet as loyal to the family as you claim to have been would surely have known of it. The old man's face was a mask of resentment. He looked from Poirot to me, then spat into the cold hearth. You can see yourselves out. I've said my piece. As we walked back down the muddy lane toward the hall, I felt a sense of triumph. He's hiding something, Poirot. I'd wager he's been coaching the claimant all along. He practically admitted it. Poirot, however, was thoughtful, tapping his chin with his gloved finger. Perhaps, Hastings, perhaps. But it is not what he said that interests me most. It is the name he pretended not to recognize. Mary Dennison? I asked, recalling the name from Tarrant's own story. Yes, Hastings. Mary Dennis, the very cause of Sir Roger's voyage. A valet as loyal as Baxter claims to have been would have known the greatest secret of his young master's life. Yet he denies it. Meanwhile, James Tarrant, the man Baxter is supposedly coaching, told us her name freely, without any prompting. He paused, a glint in his eye. A strange thing, is it not? For a man coached by a bitter valet to reveal a secret that the valet himself pretends not to know. The threads, Hastings, they do not align. Several days after our visit to the disgruntled Mr. Baxter, a telegram arrived at Tichborne Hall. Jennings, the butler, brought it in on a silver salver, his expression as impenetrable as ever. Poirot opened it with a flick of his fruit knife and read in silence, the corner of his mouth twitching upward. Ah, he murmured. Our good inspector is ever the soul of efficiency. News from Australia? I asked eagerly. Just so. He laid the telegram flat on the table between us. Poirot, Tichborne Hall, Hampshire. Stop. Inquiries made with Queensland authorities. Stop. Wreck of Alberta confirmed, 1892. Stop. Survivor list incomplete. Stop. No record of James Tarrant in goldfields or cattle stations. Stop. One James Tarrant sailed Melbourne to London, 1921. Matches description. Stop. Identity unconfirmed. Stop. I frowned. So Tarrant lied about working in Kalgoorlie, but someone by that name did sail to England? Yes. Where a lie sits beside a truth, like mismatched bookends. He confessed to adopting a false name, but not, it seems, the entire persona. It suggests a man blending invention with experience. The question is, did he build this identity himself, or was it built for him? He tapped the telegram thoughtfully. This James Tarrant may have come from nowhere, or from someone else's memory. But we must return to our English thread. Hastings. The governess, Miss Pilling. Lady Frances, his old confidant. More than that, a governess is witness to the formative years, to habits that no impostor could easily fake. She may hold the key to the puzzle. Miss Pilling's house in Cheltenham was neat, symmetrical, and immaculately maintained, rather like the woman herself. She greeted us with precise politeness, ushering us into a parlor full of lace antimacassars and the scent of lavender. Her posture was erect, her manner efficient, and her eyes, behind gold-rimmed spectacles, shrewd. Lady Frances wrote to inform me of your visit, she said, pouring tea into porcelain cups. It is quite a turn of events. After all these years, I confess I do not know what to think. It is not opinion we seek, mademoiselle, said Poirot gently. Only memory. You were governess to both boys. Primarily to Roger, she said. George was always independent. He preferred the company of adults from an early age. And Roger? Her expression softened. He was vivid, imaginative, prone to mischief, but never cruel. He loved adventure stories, Treasure Island especially, and riddles. He used to set traps in the nursery, just to see if I could spot them. Clever, if exasperating. Poirot sipped his tea. And his studies. Quick with figures, when he could be bothered. He solved problems in his head, refused to write out his steps. His tutor despaired, but he had the spark, certainly. Poirot set down his cup delicately. And he wrote with which hand? Her eyebrows rose slightly. His right, of course. Only the right? Poirot asked mildly. A pause. Well, now that you mention it, she said, tilting her head. There was a phase. He must have been about 14 when he insisted on training his left hand, writing, drawing, even eating. Said it was to balance the brain. It irritated Sir Reginald to no end, but Roger would not be dissuaded. Poirot inclined his head, filing that away. And physical marks? Did he have any scars you remember? Perhaps on his chin. Certainly. Fell from the big oak by the lake when he was 9. Tore open his left knee. Had a scar there ever after. He was very proud of it. As for his face, no, I don't recall anything on the chin. I was always quite attentive about such things. I glanced at Poirot. Lady Frances had recalled a scar on the chin. This was the second clear contradiction. Poirot's tone shifted slightly. There was, we understand, a matter involving a kitchen maid, Mary Dennison. Miss Pilling's lips thinned. Yes. Roger became entangled. He was impulsive, always led by sentiment. It was not malicious, just foolish. I believe he felt she had been wronged. I told Lady Frances that dismissing the girl so abruptly was cruel, but it was not my place to interfere. She paused. Roger grieved it deeply, in his own way. Poirot stood, offering a small, appreciative bow. Your memory is admirable, mademoiselle. Few witnesses recall so clearly, or so dispassionately. We took our leave soon after and returned to the car. The hedge slipped past in green blurs, but Poirot remained pensive, one gloved finger tapping against his chin. Well, I prompted. What do you make of it? He did not answer at once. Then, we have a man who remembers being quick with numbers. Confirmed. He recalls precisely a fall from a tree. Also confirmed. These are not things one reads in society columns. Hastings. They are habits of the private self. But the scar just so. Lady Frances recalls one on the chin. Miss Pilling recalls none, but one on the knee. An old governess with 10 such wounds. The mother, perhaps, remembers only what lingers in the imagination. I frowned. So does it help us? Poirot turned to me, eyes bright. It tells us this. The claimant's knowledge is not only detailed, it is selectively detailed. Some truths, some absences, some careful guesses. It is a patchwork. Either he is Roger, or he has been coached by someone who knew Roger better than anyone else. Then who? He smiled, not without mischief. That, mon ami, is the next thread to follow. The late afternoon light, gentle and rain-veiled, gave the great drawing-room a sepulchral calm as we gathered once more at Poirot's bidding. The fire had burned low. The walls seemed to lean closer, listening. Lady Frances, hands neatly folded to conceal their tremor, fixed her gaze on the coins atop the mantelpiece. Sir George stood rigid by the window, the flare of defiance in his eye now dulled by days of tension. And James Tarrant, Roger de Sum, waited with the unself-conscious poise of a man who has learned there is nothing left to confess. Trim and composed, he stepped forward, every gesture deliberate, as though setting his pieces upon a chessboard for the final move. Let us tie together what is known, and what can only be felt. His voice, low and clear, cut through the hush. You have all spoken truly, but memory is not a court, and hearts are rarely convinced by logic alone. Still, the little gray cells, they demand order. He turned first to Lady Frances. Madam, you have said your son had a scar upon his chin from a fall at 10. Yet Miss Pilling, your son's governess, recalls none on the face, only one on the left knee. A cut she herself dressed after an accident at 9. Poirot gestured gently toward James. Monsieur, if you please. Without embarrassment, James pulled back his trouser to display the faint, pale mark over his left kneecap. Sir George's eyes narrowed, as if to challenge the evidence, even as he recognized it. Poirot continued. Miss Pilling further remembered a time, at 14, when Roger insisted upon training his left hand for writing, drawing, even fencing. Lady Frances, you recall your son's right-handedness, but perhaps it is the old habits that linger with mothers, non? Yet both Baxter, the valet, and Miss Pilling confirmed the boy's experiment was real, if exasperating to Sir Reginald. He allowed a moment's quiet, the import of these shared memories hanging in the air. Such details, the habits of writing, the presence of an old scar, could be learned, yes, he acknowledged, but they are not printed in society pages, nor easily gleaned from servants. They are witnessed only by those at the heart of a household. At this, Lady Frances pressed a hand to her lips, and even George faltered, his certainty flickering. And then Poirot delivered his final card. When first you arrived, Monsieur Tarrant, you named the kitchen girl, Mary Dennison, and revealed the source of the old family sorrow. Yet Baxter, the only servant with cause to prompt you, denied altogether that such a name had ever been whispered in this house. Is it conceivable, he asked, voice low but firm, that a man coached in private would expose so intimate a scandal, unwanted and unguided? He turned to Lady Frances. Your own letter said none outside the family knew the truth of that unhappy summer. Did you ever confide in a servant? Lady Frances shook her head, silent. Poirot's eyes softened. Thus, I offer this. A man may forge a name, guess a scar, but the manner of standing, one foot turned as the mother remembers, the sudden unstudied gesture, and the willingness to wound himself with an old shame he need not claim. These things, they are not so easily manufactured. The silence held, deep and reverent. It was Sir George who finally broke it, his voice rough. It is a patchwork, he said, and I heard the crack in what had been granite. But perhaps my own memory is no less frayed. Poirot drew me aside, as the family at last gave way to an exhausted mingling of laughter and tears. See, Hastings, evidence convinces the mind, but only recognition heals the heart. In matters of doubt, sometimes one must accept the tapestry, however mended. As we drove away through the Hampshire dusk, the house behind us turned to shadow and memory. Poirot, I ventured, after some miles of silence, do you truly believe? He did not answer immediately. Instead, he withdrew something from his coat, a small, folded page, worn at the creases. He gave this to me, Poirot said softly, after the drawing room, before the family embraced him. I think he wanted it read only if doubt remained. He handed it to me. The handwriting was rough, but unmistakably sincere. Mother, do you remember the green kite? The one I begged father to buy. It caught in the tall oak near the Westfield. You promised we'd fetch it together, but that night the fever took hold. I never flew a kite again. I have carried that day in my memory like a charm. I didn't come back for an inheritance. I came back for that moment, to ask if you remember it too. Roger, I read it twice, feeling a lump rise in my throat. I don't recall any mention of a kite, I murmured. No, Poirot said. Nor did Baxter. Nor Miss Pilling. It is not something a pretender would invent. He tucked the note back into his pocket, with the care one might give a pressed flower. Non Hastings, he said. There is no final proof, no sealed testament. But what is memory, if not the soul's fingerprint? This was for her. Not for the court. Not even for me. And so it ended, not with certainty, but with something rarer. A private truth, offered without demand. A thread tied not by logic, but by love. As the mists clear over Tichborne Hall, Hercule Poirot reveals the claimant's true identity through intimate memories no impostor could forge, confirming James Tarrant as the lost Sir Roger, and reuniting a fractured family. The case of the Vanished Viscount concludes with truth prevailing over doubt, yet echoes of lost years lingering, like forgotten scars.